back. WN part of the show. The Capitals have a 3-1 lead. I am headed out to the Diamond in the Desert, Sin City, and Las Vegas. T-Mobile Arena will tee it up on Thursday night. Ed Frankovic will be out on Twitter. I will be in the rink in Vegas, and this guy will be there. And I know he's met the Stanley Cup because it's on the front of his Twitter. He is followed by hundreds of thousands of hockey fans literally all over the world. You know him from NHL Network. I know him as a disgruntled Giants fan from 2001. We welcome in the senior reporter for all things NHL Network who, dude, you do this every year, this crazy 8 weeks where you never go home. You're on the road. You're in Winnipeg. You're in Vegas. You're in D.C. You're in Tampa. EJ Hradek is headed back to Vegas. And I guess from a reporter standpoint, you wouldn't mind this thing ending in 5, would you?
Well, I mean, it would be nice to be home. So, but, the teams, I learned long ago, my feelings are not what's going to make or break this thing. It's going to be done by the teams on the ice. And right now the Washington Capitals are playing some terrific hockey. And we go to Thursday night, and we'll find out to see if the Las Vegas Golden Knights can get this thing turned around. But right now it looks pretty good for the Caps.
With your darkness reference out on Twitter, I'm going to have you compare the Capitals to a Springsteen song before it's all over with. But in this particular case, to see the level of confidence, to know what the franchise has been through, to sit in the bowels of the D.C. arena the other night and see Ovechkin and see Holtby, see Trotz, see these guys come out after blowing 3-1 leads, which you've seen them do before. Is there some belief or resolve that this group must be different given all of the adversity they've overcome here through the 5-6 weeks?
Well, they have to be different because they've gotten to the Stanley Cup final, which they haven't been able to do in the past. So clearly, it's a different group. They have been able to overcome any kind of adversity that's come their way, and just think how it started. Go back to the first 2 games at home against the Columbus Blue Jackets, losing both of those kind of wild games. And it looked like it was going to be a very short postseason for the Washington Capitals, but they made some adjustments. Braden Holtby came off the bench and has been terrific for them, and they managed to win 4 straight over the Blue Jackets and take down their old friends from Pittsburgh, and even managed to kind of have a screwy, crazy series with the Tampa Bay Lightning where they were up, then they were down, and then they were up again, and now this 3-1 lead over this expansion juggernaut, the biggest Golden Knights. So it's been a kind of a crazy ride for the Caps this year, but pretty clearly it's a different group this year and a team that can stare adversity in the face and come away laughing.
Because I haven't had you on, let's talk about the Vegas experiment. I mean, where were you on this a year ago when there was no thought this team could win a Stanley Cup or could be in the final, but the fact that you could put together a team like this in the modern era, it really is a tip of the cap to George McPhee and what he's done since he's gone out there.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing job by their whole group, from Bill Foley, the owner, right on down to George McPhee, to everybody in their organization. And it's funny when you go back to they had the unveiling of the name and things, well before the expansion draft. That kind of didn't go well. They kind of fouled up the PowerPoint presentation, I believe, and it just seemed like, boy, this is going to be some ride with this organization. But that was the only thing they really screwed up. After that, they put together a team that, again, I didn't see it coming. I don't think anybody did, that they were going to be as good as they were, a team that won a division title, the Pacific Division, and then rolled through 3 rounds of the playoffs, only losing 3 games in those 3 rounds. So it's an interesting run. It certainly it's almost a storybook like season for that team, with the exception of the ending. Now the ending certainly looks in question with the way things have gone in these first 4 games. But I had no thought at the start of the season that this team would be anywhere near as good as they've been. And when you go back into late October and November, and remember that they went through 3 or 4 or 5 goalies, and they still managed to finish where they did, is something amazing. So you got to give everybody out there a lot of credit Gerard Gallant, that whole group, because it's been a heck of a ride so far, and who knows, maybe they got one more surprise left in them.
Well, one of the concerns would be Flurry, right? And that the Capitals have never bested him, that he is a game-tested, down 3-1 kind of goalie as we turn this series toward Game 5 in Vegas. With him, I guess anything's possible, but they didn't give him much of a chance on Monday night, right? I mean, like, literally, even Gallant after the game said, they couldn't score early, and then it just all went downhill. But even he, having that sort of pedigree gets you a little nervous if you're getting on the plane going out to Vegas, because that will be the most difficult part of this, I think, is Flurry. I think he'll be different out there.
Well, the bottom line for the Vegas Golden Knights is that they've got to finish their chances around the net. They haven't been able to do that in these last couple of games, and I think Marc-Andre Fleury he's been okay, but he's been like the rest of the team. He hasn't been good enough, and that's kind of where things are at right now. I figure that they will give a strong effort in Game 5 back on their home ice. I always think the team that loses, getting that extra day off between games is always something that's helpful to them. But really, they need to have it needs to start with scoring some goals and creating more pressure around Braden Holtby. I did think certainly in Game 4 they came out with a great start in that first 8 to 10 minutes, but they couldn't score. They had a couple of great looks at it. James Neal had a wide open net, hit a post, and then Colin Miller takes a not so smart penalty in the neutral zone, and the Caps are off to the races.
EJ Radek has covered all things hockey in the National Hockey League for the better part of 3 decades. He will be on NHL Network. By the way, I've loved watching your network. Can I just say that? And the enthusiasm around all this, and whether it's Sting and Shaggy out in the parking lot, or Fallout Boy and Lil Jon out in Vegas. I mean, your network in enveloping this thing. It's been a great showcase, I think, for our fan base to see what the NHL Network's all about and see the coverage you guys do, man.
Well, thanks a lot. I appreciate it, Nestor. In the U.S., there are not a lot of outlets, national outlets, obviously, that cover the National Hockey League well on a day-to-day basis. We live in kind of a different world now than certainly when I grew up, and I think it's great to have, for the hockey fan in the U.S. to have a place he could turn to for, day-by-day coverage of the entire season and through the playoffs and even in the off season. So we appreciate it. We got a lot of people that really love the game and are working hard, whether it be in front of the camera or behind the scenes, to make it happen. And it's been, I know for me, coming over from ESPN back in 2011, it's been a great opportunity because hockey has been my passion, and we get to continue to grow the game in the U.S., which is a lot of fun.
Well, it's been a lot of fun to see all the hockey media luminaries and dignitaries. I even ran into Tony Robbins after the game, going down, giving the Caps a pep talk after the game. But let's go to the Caps here, and let's go one by one. Let's start with Ovechkin, and I guess there's a wide think, over a decade that maybe it's just not going to happen for him at some point, right? And we've seen the fat version, the broken down version, a disinterested version, a rich version, a poor version, and this version of Ovechkin, whatever got into the soup last year and whatever got into the disappointment for all of them, I think when the story is written here, it's going to be all about him and about that light turning on physically, mentally, spiritually. Look, McClellan, Trotz, they put a lot of good pieces around him, but this isn't destiny for him. I mean, I think we all looked for a number of years and said, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. Maybe he'll be the greatest player to never win one. Now that he stands on the cusp, but I don't think there's any shock that he has been the most dramatic part of this from literally the beginning of the season till now.
Well, he is the face of that franchise. He's been the face of the Capitals franchise really since he was drafted, and since he has taken the ice for the team back in 2005. So he's been a dynamic goal scorer. He's the best goal scorer of this era, and maybe the greatest goal scorer ever to play. And unfortunately for Ovi and for a lot of guys who kind of fall into that window as great goal scorers, it's the ultimate team game. You're on the ice for 45 seconds to a minute. You're off. Other guys are out there. They've got to do their job, make it happen. I think Ovi, like any player coming into any sport, has to learn the things that you need to do to win. They've had some really good teams over the year that just, for one reason or another, haven't been able to get there. And, this year you look back and you know how this is. The last couple of years, their roster, you would look at their roster on paper and say it was much stronger. But this year the pieces have all been in the right place, and I think Alex's demeanor on and off the ice have been just right. And helping this team when they got down, he was forceful in saying that they would find a way back and find a way to win. And, when this team has been leading in games and Barry Trotz has opted to use guys that you would use to protect the lead more, there's been no complaining from Alex Ovechkin. He's been on the bench, emoting and fully engaged in the game. So it's been a very a long and amazing run for him as a player in this league, and now he's just one game away from the ultimate prize. So it seems like that's, and this is the best thing you can say about any player in this sport is that that seems to be all he cares about right now is trying to win, and that's that's kind of where things are at for him right now.
EJ Radek is our guest from NHL Network. You can find him out on Twitter at EJ Radek. That's H-R-A-D-E-K. The H is silent, _NHL. You can find him out on Twitter, as well as quoting Springsteen, some LeBron memes. You do it all out there, EJ. You're very, very versatile on Twitter. Hopi, I guess... you're a writer, and I wrote a book on the Ravens 5 years ago, and when you win a championship, you start to piece together all of these little things that happen from drafts and turning points. In the case of Holtby not even beginning these playoffs, that Grubauer began this thing, he played the second game and not well, and there was lots of questions. Trotz got dragged into this for the decision to start Grubauer. The fact that Holtby has screwed it together, obviously a very well-compensated goalie, but that he has had the resolve to get to this point. You need that, too. I mean, I go back to Tom Barrasso when I was a kid, for crying out loud. You got to have the hot goalie. Holtby has turned out to be that guy here during April and May and June.
Yeah, he's been really brilliant when he's had to be. There's no question about that. It's been such an interesting season for him to think that he basically lost the net in the second half of the year. Late in the year, Philip Grubauer was playing very well. Got the trust of Barry Trotz, got the start in games 1 and games 2 against the Columbus Blue Jackets going back to round 1. And, that was those couple of games. If you look at those games and you ask somebody to say, well, this team is going to go to a Stanley Cup final, you would have been amazed because things were not going good. They couldn't kill penalties, and the Columbus Blue Jackets were scoring a bunch of goals, and it wasn't good. And Braden Holtby came in and just, with the way he does, he's kind of doesn't say much, gets in the net, pretty relaxed, tries to do his best job night after night. I think these last couple of games, I think he's been at his absolute best. I didn't think, even though he had shutouts in games 6 and 7 in the Eastern Conference Final against the Tampa Bay Lightning, I thought there was a lot of loose pucks around the net. The games weren't kind of clean games for a goaltender. I think there was more good fortune in those games than a lot of things. But in Game 2 in Vegas, it seemed like he locked things down. Pucks were sticking to him. He was holding pucks around the net. He was directing rebounds to the corner. Obviously, he made that once-in-a-lifetime save.
I was going to say, miracles happen, happen, divine red intervention happen, which has to happen as well. Every Stanley Cup, one of those happen, right?
You have to have that fortune, the good fortune to win. And it's funny, the Washington Capitals have been around since 1974, and they haven't had a ton of good bounces in big spots during their history as a franchise. Well, all those bad bounces have kind of turned the other way, and it's been kind of a deluge of good fortune in these last several games. And Braden Holtby, though, has really, I just think he's been the guy to tighten things up, and he's been there when they needed him. And he's got to be really proud of his performance at this point in what he's done, because he has just been terrific in all the big moments in these last several games, all these critical games. So he's a guy that you root for and you're happy for because he just goes out there and does his job and doesn't really say much other than trying to get things done. And he's had to sit in that locker room, as you know, and explain away some really tough losses over the last several years. So it's it's something it's good to see a guy like that having the success at this point in time.
EJ Radek is from that island of Long, and you can find him out at NHL Network before, during, and after games, as well as out on Twitter at EJ_Radek_NHL. You know, you mentioned Game 2 out in Vegas, and the big storyline leaving there was, 1-1, we're going to have a long series, all that stuff. I still hope we don't have a long series, but Kuznetsov and the injury to him on the backside of what happened to Backstrom in the last series, that you start to take on this attrition, and, you know, Wilson with the suspension before. There have been guys missing. Kuznetsov was one of those guys where you said, if he doesn't play the rest of the series in a 1-1 series against Vegas, they're going to struggle. So he gets back out on the ice. Ovechkin said some things that he would play in Game 3. Not only played, I mean, he in on 4 goals in Game 4. And a guy that's really elevated his game. And I think for any of the pundits in the offseason who did not like the Capitals, thought they had regressed, thought they weren't as good, maybe there was some thought that some of the emerging players were not going to emerge for the Capitals, because Kuznetsov certainly has emerged this year. And as much as, you know, there'll be a story about Trotz, and there'll be a story about Ovechkin, and there'll be a story about Hopi, boy, Kuznetsov has been a real difference maker, because I think a lot of national people sort of wrote him off as a hot and cold guy that, you know, on any given night, but not a guy that could consistently put it together, because he never really had.
Yeah, but, you know, at the end of the day, I think that, you know, oftentimes, especially in this era where we're, you know, very much in the minute all the time, this guy was a first-round draft pick. He was a really talented kid that had come over from Russia, played very well in the league, had a playoffs that weren't very good, had a playoffs that were okay. I just think it was the maturation process for Evgeny Kuznetsov. I think he's gotten more and more comfortable here. He's gotten more and more comfortable playing in the NHL. He's gotten more and more comfortable playing alongside of Alex Ovechkin. He doesn't defer to Ovechkin, you know, anymore. If he's got an opportunity to shoot the puck, he'll shoot the puck. He's more of a playmaker, but he'll shoot, and that's been a big difference in his game, that the goaltenders and defenders can't rely on him to always look to make a pass. He'll shoot the puck. He had that great goal coming off the wing on that kind of semi 3-on-1 in game number 3, and just a terrific shot, a pinpoint shot off the far post and in. And he has just been so much fun to watch in this playoff run, and certainly in these Stanley Cup finals. To think that he missed a good chunk of Game 2, it looked like he was potentially going to be out of the series, and then to come back 3 points in Game 3, and then 4 assists in Game 4. It's been a virtuoso performance by a guy that's a really talented player that I think has just settled into life in the NHL, and I think only good things are ahead for this kid.
EJ Radek is our guest for the NHL Network, and they'll get it going out in the Diamond in the Desert in Vegas. I better get a picture of Wayne Newton and I together before this is all over with. I mean, at some point, Wayne's got to drop the puck out there. They've done an incredible job of putting that thing together, and all the noise, and I called it a bad wedding the other night. You know, I guess it sort of sets the tone for all of this, you know, getting through this Vegas thing for them and climbing this mountain of 3-1 where they've lost all sorts of 3-1 leads here. Some thoughts about, you know, what it will look like for a Stanley Cup for Barry Trotz through all these years. Because I know he's one of your favorites. He's everybody's favorite down in Nashville for a decade and a half, sort of toiling in obscurity. But here is the lifer hockey guy that I've never met anybody with a bad word for Barry Trotz.
Yeah, there aren't too many people that don't like Barry Trotz. He's one of those guys that, you know, if you have a problem with him, you probably have a problem with you, because you know, Barry just goes about his business, and it's been a hard year for him, as you know, Nestor. I mean, he's been without a contract. I know that there wasn't a lot of discussion between him and management for most of the season, and yet Barry went out day after day and did his job, and, you know, tried to work some young defensemen into his lineup, and some acquisitions that came along, guys like Michael Kempney later in the season, and try to kind of patch things together on defense after losing, you know, several guys that had been there for a while. And, you know, he just goes about things and has made it happen. And I think sometimes these situations can be good for people because maybe they'd be liberating in some ways. When in the past, maybe Barry, thought about different things coaching and was looking at, in different situations when you have to make tough decisions, maybe there was other things in his mind. This year, he knew it was his last year of his contract, wasn't sure how things were going to go, decided, hey, I'm just going to do this my way, and there are going to be some tough decisions along the way. A decision to start Philip Grubauer in the start of the playoffs. It was one that didn't necessarily work out. But at the end of the day, that's not a decision that, someone who's not sure of himself makes. And, I think there were other decisions throughout the year, giving people opportunities and certainly things that have gone on over the last 2 months as the Capitals have kind of climbed this ladder to the Stanley Cup final. He has done just a terrific, terrific job. But I do think that part of that is just, his situation was a little bit liberating for him. And I think if he was going to go out, he was going to go out on his terms. And, he's in a great situation now because he's basically a free agent. And when you go through that process of free agency, you like to do it with your best foot forward. I would say that he's had his best foot forward over the last couple of weeks.
Is there any chance he's coming back?
I think there'd be a good chance he's coming back. I mean, I don't, Nestor, when I think about situations where somebody wins a Stanley Cup, the only times they don't really come back is if they decide to step away. I mean, Scotty Bowman won his last cup in 2002 and decided to step away. When guys win the Stanley Cup, they're usually behind the bench the next year. I got to go back probably to Mike Keenan with the Rangers in 1994 as a guy that ended up leaving the team and going somewhere else right after they won the Stanley Cup. So I think there's still a really good chance that Barry stays. I think there'll be pressure certainly to keep him. I think that, when they look at things, I don't know if they have a better option. You win a Stanley Cup in the first in franchise history. I think you'd be hard pressed to sell that to your fan base that, hey, we've decided to go in a different direction. I think Barry's going to be the one that makes the decision in the end because, he can decide that either he wants to continue on or he wants to maybe take a break. I'm sure that there'll be a big market for Barry Trotz if he decides to leave Washington, but I'm real happy for him because at the end of the day here, I think the decision is going to be more with him than it will be anywhere else, and it's nice to be in that situation in life.
I cover football for a living, and when I covered the championship team 5 years ago, I talked about how little oxygen there is in the room when you come into a circumstance, for a Flacco, let's say, that you get drafted into a room that already has Ray Lewis, that already has Terrell Suggs, that already has Ed Reed, and I think TJ Oshie's a little bit like that coming in the side door of this thing, and a guy that I'm sure you appreciated the way he played the game and prior to, but what an acquisition, and I know there was a lot of negative speculation on the backside of the amount of money he was given. Some thoughts about TJ Oshie, and because he is the guy that sort of came in the side door as one of the straws that stirs the drink. He didn't come off the boat like Ovechkin or across the pond like Kuznetsov. He was a selected guy. They brought him in. They didn't just like him. They loved him and built him as a corner piece of this thing. And certainly the girls and the fans have taken to him. He was the number one star of the game with a goal and a couple of assists and is out there like a wrecking ball right now. But, he was a little bit of a forgotten guy before he came along, right? I mean, he was almost deemed a disappointment, right?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily argue with that assessment. He is someone that he's a very likable guy. There's a lot of upside to his game, but he was at this point of his career, he was really going to be best remembered for what he did in the Olympics with the shootout. He's got that terrific shootout move, TJ Oshie. That was the big thing back in 2014. And watching him play now in this series, he just looks like a guy that has just had enough of losing. And you get to that point, I've seen that from different teams and different players over the years, that they're willing to do just about anything to find a way to win. And he looks like he's had that he's gone through that kind of feeling. And, he's playing some terrific hockey for the Capitals. He's bouncing all over the rink in terms of getting hit, delivering hits. He's scoring goals, setting up plays, and you go back to the Carlson goal. I believe it was in game 1 or game 2, where he made the great pass across, and John Carlson basically had an empty net to score into. So he's done everything for the Capitals. And I'll go back to last year at the draft. I remember when they announced the contract extension, the 8 years, and I was shocked because, you know, he's not 25 years old. He's an older player. That 8 years will take him just shy of 40. And for someone, as you said, that came into the mix, that's not a homegrown guy, to get that kind of contract, they showed a lot of faith in him. And he's really, after a season where he had some injuries, had some time when he really struggled in the year, this has got to be really satisfying for him and for the franchise, because when you make a deal like that, that kind of term, you got to have success early in that contract to make it worthwhile. And I don't know if he can have much more success at this point than where they are right now. So he's got to be thrilled, and you know, it's been a terrific series for him. He's been one of those guys that's been a big difference maker for this team. EJ,
I always appreciate our conversations, our friendship. I don't bug you much, but when I do, it means the Caps might be winning the Cup. So I appreciate you taking some time here. Hey, and I'll tell you, for all of you guys that do this for a living, and you know, I'm on the NFL beat pretty full time, traveling around. I know everybody that's sort of on the circuit. It really is an amazing thing that you guys do here every April, May, and June to sort of leave the family at home and go on the traveling circus, because I thought I was going to Winnipeg. I was going to ask TJ Oshie about what life was like in Grand Forks, because I was going to have to drive through there from Minnesota up to Winnipeg to get there. But you guys do this every year. I really tip my cap to you. I hope that we don't have 3 more games left in us, and I hope you're there to witness me drinking the champagne of Tom Ebright out of Lord Stanley's chalice on Thursday night in Vegas. But always appreciate you, man. Great work you guys do at the network.
All right. Thanks a lot, Nestor. Appreciate it.
EJ Hradek, that's a silent H. He's a Springsteen fan, so you know he's cool. From the island of Long and from NHL Network, you can find him at EJ Hradek _NHL out on Twitter. You can also find him on the Boob Tube Thursday night as we all rock the red and get ready for the Caps to hoist the goblet, the chalice. I got to contain myself. I got to hydrate. Plenty of fluids for Thursday night. Nasty at WNST.net finds me. The buyatoyota.com audio vault there 24 hours a day. For anything that you missed, we're going to be doing a lot of hockey around here the next couple days. So hold on to your puck, as they would say. We're headed out to the desert. Mixing a little baseball in as well. You can find some Orioles complaints at buyatoyota.com. Audio vault. It's live. It's there for you. You can listen anytime you want, when you want, where you want, to what you want in the hockey world as we prepare for Thursday night. The buyatoyota.com audio vault. Our morning newspaper ships to your email inbox at 7 a.m. It's all brought to you by Planet Fitness and PlanetFitness.com, where it's still $10 a month to get in the best shape of your life guarantee. We also have the Maryland Jockey Club and Laurel entries on the front of our WNST website, as well as in the morning newspaper. Any breaking news when the Orioles decide to give away Manny Machado for a bag of beans, we'll be doing that on the WNST text service. It's all brought to you by Coons Ford of Security Boulevard. I am Nestor. We are WNST.net, AM 1570, and WNST Towson, Baltimore, and we never stop talking Baltimore sports.